The first thing we're going to do is identify where we're going to be installing this AC bracket. So we're going to use the top two bolt holes here in the cylinder head. We're also going to use this water pump boss right here. Now, on the Corvette version, we need to identify which water pump you have. This is the LS3 with the outlet over here. If it had the outlet over here, still has a shallow bell, that would be an LS2. And then, of course, the LS1 has the big fat bell that uses both Corvette and Camaro spacing. That'll be important in a later step. We're going to start with a little bit of pre-assembly. So we're going to take one of our 100mm bolts and insert it right here. And then there are 3 tubes that are the same length, and we're going to install it there, and then bring this in here to install right there, and then add your nut, just like so. That's going to hold these 2 plates relatively together, keep it pretty loose, and that'll help with the rest of the installation. We're going to finish the pre-assembly here. Take the other longer spacer, 100mm bolt right there, slide it all the way through, just like so. Now here we're going to use the 140 because it'll actually attach the tensioner in a later step, but we're going to go ahead and slide that through so everything gets nice and aligned. And as we tighten things up, it isn't difficult to install in a later step. Now over here, this actually is going to require a split tube and spacer. So we take the spacer with the dot and this one here, and also our support brace, another 100mm, small tube first, just like that. Then we'll put in the support brace, the tube with the dot, slide that all together, a little bit tight, but a tight hole is going to make for a good alignment later. Now we're ready to install it on the cylinder head. Now there are 2 very small spacers included as well, and they will go on where the cylinder head just bolts go, but then you just slide it on, get it lined up, and just give it a couple little twists to make sure everything's aligned. And then we're going to go ahead and tighten them down, but do not get it overly tight. You're looking for about finger tight when you're done, and we'll come in here and attach that. Now, this is the part where I told you earlier, it depends on which water pump you have. So with the LS2, with the outlet here, small bell, LS3, this spacing is just slightly different than the LS1. So in order to not bend this when we clamp it down, we've included a little washer right there. So you just swing your tube up, install the bolt, slide it down, and tighten it up. Once again, we're going to take that to finger tight. LS2, LS3 gets the washer, LS1 does not. The next step is we're going to install this compressor right here. One of the things I want to draw your attention to, this sleeve actually moves in and out. And for this installation, we actually want this to be flush right here so that it's not interfering at all, and then we'll adjust it in a later step. So we're just going to take this. I find this to be a pretty simple way to hold it in place, is to go ahead and put the back one in like that, and then just thread that in just slightly so that it pivots up and is holding the weight for you. And then you come up here and start that one in there. Now, it's just like that. We're going to leave this loose and we're going to go through a torque sequence. We are now ready to torque the bracket so that we can square the bracket to the cylinder head. We're going to lift up on the compressor to take out all the slack, make sure there's no binding. We're going to start here with this one into the cylinder head, followed by this one, then the water pump boss, and then this one here. These are all 10mm bolts, so we're going to tighten them to 37 foot-pounds. It's important that you do not over-tighten them because there's all sorts of terrible things that can happen then. This one does require a 15mm on the back end here. Just get the open box end on it. All right, now that we have this tightened up and squared to the cylinder head, we're going to move over here to the compressor and square the compressor to the bracket. This will be a 13mm. And we're going to drop down to 15 foot-pounds. Doesn't take a lot. And then the bottom side as well. Need that extension one more time. Now we have this bolt in the back here. One of the things I want you guys to check is just to make sure that that bolt hasn't bound up, because if it has, that's a sign of something else has gone wrong. Maybe these plates moved a little bit. This one's nice and free, so we're going to go ahead, add our nut, and we'll torque it down to 15 foot-pounds as well. Before we do tighten this up, I do want us to take a look at, remember this sliding sleeve here? Well, now it's made it up here, and there's a couple different ways to tell whether or not this is in the correct position. We want this to come up and just kiss this, so you can either take a feeler gauge and come in here and actually feel if it has a gap, or if you don't have one of those handy, you can use a flashlight and shine up there to see if it's a gap. Now, if there is a little bit of a gap, all you have to do is take your hammer and give it a little tap. But once again, don't drive it in to where this can flex in like that. That can cause misalignment. We're ready to install the idler pulley right here. So we're going to take our 12mm bolt, slide it through there, get our idler post on there, followed by the idler itself. Just get it nice and seated. Not a big deal. And then followed by the nut. Now this is a 12mm bolt, so we're actually going to be torquing it all the way to 50 foot-pounds. Next, we're going to pull out this 140mm bolt here and install it in the tensioner. This has a locating pin, and that's going to go right here. So you just slide the bolt in, get it to its locating pin, and then this is a 10mm bolt again, so we're going to be back at 37 foot-pounds of torque. Now we're at the time for installing the belt. To get the proper belt length, you're going to have to take into account what you're doing over here on the alt power steering side. We're using our 5.5-inch power steering pump pulley and the PowerMaster small case alternator. So that determines what belt we're going to use here. One of the pro tips I want to pass along is it's usually the best to pick a smooth pulley to be the last one to be installed. That way when you put the torque down on it, you can just bring it down and just easily slide it over there. You don't want to be trying to go over a ribbed pulley. Now we're going to go through and inspect and make sure that we're seated down in every single pulley groove. And now it's time to take a look at the tensioner marks. We do our absolute best to give you a recommended belt length that's going to be perfect the first time, but we still want you to check this because there can be variations. And so on this tensioner here, there is actually maximum and minimum stops, and then the spring here acts as sort of the center line. When we install the belt, we actually want it to be just a little bit on the tight side. So as the belt wears and stretches just slightly, also when we first install it, it's actually not set down all the way in the groove, so this is going to loosen up a little bit. And we want a belt that's going to be riding at that point after everything breaks in, right in the center, so you have plenty of travel, plenty of belt tension. And if you do not, before you start it up, you want to take a look at this. That way, if you need a different belt length, you can easily exchange it at the parts store, no questions asked. And we have a belt chart on the website, so if you have a question about a longer or shorter belt, you can refer to that chart at your parts store.